Thomas Gauthier at the really beginning, he mentioned Alice Comi, that at the end of the day is one of the close colleagues to Luigi Mosca, and the emancipatory inquiry that Thomas mentioned is exactly the concept that Luigi is going to share with us in his talk, titled Future Making as Emancipatory Inquiry, Practices for Collective Imagination in Uncertain Times. So in some extent, the third talk represents a step forward in relation to the two that we have already digested, talking on both imagination, collective imagination, but also about uncertainty, as Bob and August did a few seconds ago. So let me thank again Luigi for accepting our invitation, and let me briefly mention, even if now it's more than clear to you, that obviously you can rely on the same application in order to directly take notes about the question that you would like to make to Luigi, or vice versa. At the really end of the talk, you can directly jump in the discussion lively by voice and dialogue with Luigi. So let me stop the sharing from my side and leave directly the floor to Luigi.
Thank you so much, Claudio. Can you see my screen, just to be sure?
Yep, we can hear you properly and we can even see the screen.
Thank you so much, Claudio, all the organizing for having me today. It's an amazing opportunity, and unfortunately I could not join since the start, as I just, get off from the Christmas party of my university. So, but I really could not miss this opportunity to be here, to engage with you all, and to, also provide my perspective on the future, and in this particular case, the future making. As Claudio just said, I'm an Italian scholar, but based in the UK. I'm a research associate at Imperial Business School, and also an honorary research fellow at the John Grill Institute for Project Leadership at the University of Sydney in Australia. So I'm going to talk about future making as an emancipatory inquiry, and in particular try to understand why we need this collective imagination process, in particular in uncertain times that we live today. So my next slides hopefully will work. It's wonderful. So this is an exercise that I try to do a couple of times per year to collect screenshots about the news related to the future. So where is the future mentioned in some journals, in some media, such as Financial Times, BBC, and others. And what I can see that very often future is mentioned in different way, and also related to different topics. For example, recently I took this screenshot about this is the Formula E, the electric one, the future of racing, or why central banks sometimes they go wrong with their forecast, or as we were talking just now about AI and how organization individuals can cope with that. Will be the future of work still human? So that's a kind of questions that people try to understand. And also this means really that today the future is something that we really need to think about. And I'm going to provide you a different perspective, how we can think and talk about the future. Also last year, the UK industrial strategy was actually named the Forging Our Future. And, for those of you who are fan of Elon Musk, also is thinking about the future of the cities. And there is this kind of picture here where thinking about how a city will look like in the future. So definitely this is a relevant topic. People talk about the future, different perspectives, different way of talk about the future. But we believe we need to a little bit also start thinking how we make the future. And in particular, why nowadays? And I was mentioning before uncertain times. This is because, of course, we are living in this area of the so-called grand challenges, right? Pandemics, climate change, gender, financial inequalities. How we address these challenges and how we are going to solve. One of the main things that we definitely need to do is do things differently that for sure, and think differently. So one way we propose together with my colleagues that you just mentioned before, and with other scholars who also are in the room there in Polyme, we are trying to push forward this idea of the future making. So I'm going to provide you some definition first, and then also some real examples, so you will get what actually I'm trying to talk about here. So future making is actually the work on making sense of possible and probable futures. So this is already a way to say that we don't believe that there is only one future, but there are sense of possible and probable futures, and evaluating, negotiating, and giving form to the preferred ones. The negotiating is something that I'm going to talk also about later, because it's a very important part here in what we mean by future making. We try to position ourselves to see future making differently from other traditional foresight methods that are more rooted in the idea of the prediction, of the planning, and the calculation. So what we see here is that the future, we can see the future as an open inquiry. And this means that what we are going to do today, the present action, are going to shape the future outcomes. So the traditional way where you predict the future today in the next 10 years, and then you will try to react to what you predict, probably is not working anymore. What we should do is try to think today at T0, how we're going to shape the T1, the future. How are we going to do this? Together with my colleagues, we are thinking about these cycles of practices. Here I'm trying to present a few of them, like the practices of imagining, testing, stabilizing, and refining. I'll give you an example in a minute, but these practices can be done all together or some of them at the same time. It really depends on the type of future that you want to do. And one additional point that we try to push, and also through my research and also talking to some of the managers here in London that are trying to adopt this kind of future-making approach, is also that we think about not just any kind of future, but a more desirable future. And of course, the first question that comes to mind is how we can define desirable. Well, we actually believe that we can, in this case, use a normative approach, a very strong type of way of thinking, that is how the future should be. And the main thing that we believe is how we add value to the future. So this is something that we can only achieve by collectively negotiating, the future with multiple actors. And I will tell you in a second what kind of actors we can engage with. Let me give you first an example. You are in Milan right now. And so you're definitely aware, in Milan, there are the Winter Olympics and Paralympic Games coming up very soon, right? I think it's in February 2026. So an interesting study and interesting research that I found out was that the International Olympics Committee Executive Board just realized that by 2040, only 10 countries will be able to host the Games. And by 2080, only one country. This is due to climate change. So because basically there is a limited natural snowfall over the next years. This seems to be quite scary, if you like, kind of prediction. And what we realized that is the International Olympic Committees, what is trying is to see how they can see the future of the Olympic Games in a different way. We believe they are trying to apply this future-making approach by doing what? To imagine how the games will look like in the future, testing through Milano Cortina, and then in the future stabilize and refine. So exactly what they are doing. As you can see now, we have the Olympic Games and the Paralympic Games in two different cities, Milano and Cortinas, for now within the same country in Italy. But the future, the next Olympic Games probably are going to be in multiple cities and even in multiple countries. This is really trying to see how the games work. So in this moment, what we are trying, in the phase that we are, this is in a phase of testing. So how we are going to see the future of these games, how we are going to deal with climate change. Of course, they cannot wait the 2080 to see, or 2040 to see, okay, we are going to evolve a few countries and then we will adjust, but they are trying to experimenting some new alternatives now. So even though I was providing you before some more academic definition, we can see that everyday countries or large organizations are actually trying to apply this different way of making the future. Then and apparently this has been already mentioned before, we see that in order to do that, we extend the idea of the future making by applying and by trying to engage with this emancipatory idea. What does mean that? That to do so, future making need to empower actors. So this means all the actors that will actually live, so future generation, natural environment, marginalized community, they actually will live in the future. So the people that today are taking the decisions, for example, where we are going to organize the Olympics game, they should actually think about the future generation. So in 2080, everybody should be able to enjoy these games, right? At the same time, we need to think about the natural environment and also some marginalized communities. And I'll have a very clear example soon after in a couple of slides about this. To do so, we need to approach and we need to involve a democratic process. This means that to take decision, we need to involve people. We need to involve the future generation, the natural environment, and think about the other communities. Because only by doing so, you can actually have the future that are desirable on a societal level, and not just for few people. And we believe that this is the only way, it's one of the ways to approach and to deal with these grand challenges that we are facing now. As we are very, we like to try to deal with some practices and ways of making stuff. Also for future making, we have 3 key main actions. One will be to try to seek emancipations and empowerment of the people, engage with people, places, and materials sincerely, try really to understand what they need and what will be the best scenario for them in the future. And also to reflect in the action. It means that even if today we start doing something, for example, if we understand that this idea of having the Olympic Games in different cities and then in different countries, it does not work out, we can actually try to experimenting and try to engage with different way of making futures. So we need to be open to have an open inquiry and be open to adjust the way how we make the future today. And engage in this, what we call reflective conversation with people, place, and materials. And something that I really care about is also to try to involve both human as well as not human agents, such as artifacts, materials, places. And I will give you an example in a second, because I think this is very, very important. As I just mentioned a few slides ago, one thing that I'll try to do is also try to compare future making as emancipatory inquiry to the other traditional approach that has been done so far. So in one of our publications, we will try to actually define in this table that I will give you the reference later, why this approach is different from the other approaches that we have seen so far. For example, scenario planning or any kind of future practice that might be relevant for people. I'm not going to read all the table, but I'm going just to highlight some key points that I think it's important. For example, how we describe this type of futures, the emancipatory inquiry really try to look for a more desirable or better future. And as I said, we really believe in this in the normative approach, where we actually believe that we need to push for a should be. So what should be a better future? And of course, we as academics like to rely on theories. So we have also some theoretical foundations that are different from the other tools or ideas that have been developed over the last years. In particular, we are trying to work on the people where they see that action decision can be taken through an open inquiry. So here there are some references. If we look at the keywords, definitely we believe that we need to push the empowerment, inclusion, reflective in actions. These are type of things that sometimes have not seen in the past. For example, in the scenario planning kind of ideas, tools, many people were talking about strategic decision making, strategic communication. Everything was supposed to be more strategic and more related to other individuals, teams, or at organizational level, without really an inclusion of other actors or the non-human actors. Of course, also the practices that I already mentioned, some of them earlier, are different, like seeking empowerment, engaging sensorially with people, places, and material, and also the approach. We believe that we need to take this idea of value very, very important. So rather to go for a value-free approach, where like scenario planning, where we just try to forecast what will be the future regardless the value that is attached to it, we try to actually to think how the value needs to be attached to the future and try to make it by today to have a better future over the years. The imagining process, of course, it's different. And also I was try to, which actually relies on alternative courses of actions that can be tested, stabilized, and also refine it over time. This means that if we do something wrong today, tomorrow we can try to do something different without be so attached to the decision that will be made. And also I leave you with the last row of this table with some references that you can read and try to compare some of the ideas that will be developed over the years. And I will have a list of reference in the last slide, and I'm happy to share these slides after my talk here. So when I was saying before about the example that I would like to see how important is also the non-human aspect, there is a question that some of the managers have asked me several times, that is like, okay, we can even believe that this might be a good approach or something quite reasonable, that, you know, we decide a better future, we go for a desirable future, but what about if we don't engage with that? There are any risks? Can you explain us if we fail, what are the risks? And I was trying, and in one of our publications, we have this example that I'm going to briefly show you, that is about one of the mining company, Rio Tinto. I think this example is quite powerful, and hopefully I can also show you a little bit a short video later, because it really gives the idea of if we don't think about human and non-human elements, if we are not ready to test our ideas and to change our course of actions, we are not going to have a better future. So for more than 46,000 years, the rock shelter of Yukon Gorge, and hope my pronunciation is fine, in Western Australia, were considered as a sacred land, in particular because the Aborigines and the people who were living there, they believed that these rock shelters, these areas, were connecting the present community, so the today's community who were living there, with their past, with all their ideas, with their traditions, with all basically the heritage that were related there. In 2013, the mining company Rio Tinto actually was able to achieve this consent to damage this heritage site in order to expand an iron mine, okay? So, but they were able to get this approval only because the law, were at that time in 2013, was actually updated in 1972. At that time, the law was aiming to favor mining rather than cultural protection. But in 2013, there was something new. And soon after this permission was granted, what happened was they started digging, and in 2008, and so they started digging, but before, in 2008, what they found, there were some artifacts about 20 years old. Anyway, they start digging, and what they found after only 1 meter that they started digging, so it was really at the beginning of the reconstruction operations, they found more than 7,000 artifacts that they were very, very relevant to this community, the community living there. Of course, there were some oppositions. However, because the Aboriginal Heritage Act was not updated, Rio Tinto could not renegotiate considering the new information they had. So they continued their work. Of course, the local people were super upset. There were a lot of problems involved. And what happened? Okay, I think probably just some microphone went on. What happened was there was a big Senate inquiry, and there was a big problem, a big, the Senate inquiry was big problems between the local people and the Rio Tinto organization. And eventually, after a couple of months, this is what we have. On the left-hand side was before Rio Tinto started digging. On the right-hand side was after a couple of months. So you can see everything was destroyed, and the poor Aboriginal people living there, basically they could see that all the stuff that all the artifacts, all the piece of history that they were trying to really keep and they were really attached to that, they were trying to conserve and to keep over the years, were just destroyed in few months. Even, I think this was after 1 month and a half, something like that, very, very, very in a short time. And if the video works, otherwise I left here the YouTube link, I will just quickly show what were the consequences of this. Of course, there were some advertising. Hopefully. Apologies for that.
We can see the video, but not hearing the audio.
Not reading the audio.
Yeah.
Sorry for that. It's okay. Well, I really recommend you all to watch the video because it's really it's touching. It's really explaining very well what happened, and there are different people telling their own story, and you can actually see how big was the damage that Rio Tinto made that time. Mostly because they could not engage with the present actions and change them. Do this to an updated Aboriginal protection law. So what happened was, after this was quite clear that Rio Tinto destroyed a big piece of land that was very important for the local people, the local communities, these are the consequences. Several senior executives, including the CEO, had to redesign. Rio Tinto of course, could not pay bonuses to some of the executives, but the most important thing was they had actually to reconstruct the land as it was before. So as you can see, engaging with the not human actors, engaging with the local communities, it's very, very important. And all the problem here were just because there was an outdated law that could not be updated, even though in 2015, so at that time it was the present time, they know that the future was not, what they were doing were not going to have a better future for the local community. However, they could not do anything. Rio Tinto went ahead at the same time, and these are all the kind of consequences, plus years and years of damage, even sentimental damages, and also many, many artifacts have been destroyed for this. This is very, I would say, sad case, but I really believe it's quite powerful to see how it's important to try to have a better future and thinking from day zero, from the present to forward, rather than doing this the other way around. And I like really the quote that I could find online from one of the chief executive of Rio Tinto, that basically was just saying that everything happened for one reason, because they could not work together with indigenous people of the lands. And definitely they were not able to actually think, respect, and value and conserve the value for the future generation. So that was actually one of the, we believe that these powerful quotes could actually represent what we mean by future making, the importance to think today for the future, and collective engagement with people and also with not human artifacts or elements. Some concluding thoughts, and then I give you the references as I promised. Grand challenges requires us to rethink how the future is shaped. Definitely. Future making is a collective value-driven process, so imagine, testing, stabilizing, and refining possibility. We believe this emancipatory inquiry can actually ensure that diverse human and not human voices are included in the decision about desirable future. And managers, practitioners, scholars, we must, as I said, I really take this normative approach here, enable ethical participatory approaches to build more sustainable futures. And I think you mentioned this before, but these examples, the tables, and also the example I present today, the definitions, are in these articles that are co-authored with with Alicia Comey, you mentioned before, and with my other co-author, Jennifer White, who are two great scholars who are really pushing forward the agenda of future making organization studies. And you can download here, I have the link on my ResearchGate page. You can download for free. These are public available, all these articles. And after that, I can just thank you for listening and open to any kind of question.